cannot make it. So yeah, okay. So the question next is, yeah, what is Restorative Response Baltimore doing in terms of your work in the community and sharing this way of life with the community?
So our vision, we imagine a world where strong relationships, authentic communication, and the desire to understand one another thrive. We trust that the solutions reside within our individual communities. We believe that every voice must be heard. We really, really strongly feel like the wisdom is really in the communities. The people that are connected to whatever needs to be worked out are the ones who should be at the forefront of trying to figure it out. Everything that we do and we preach and we talk about outside of our organization, that's what we run our organization by. That's how we live. That's how we check in. That's how we make sure that we are remaining in community as well. Right now, we're not doing anything. Well, we are. We're doing some behind the scenes kind of things. We did some role plays. We're trying to figure out how this very personal process can be translated online. I will say the groups that I have met with, I've done a couple of listening sessions, some workshops, that sort of thing. It has felt, and I believe that's because we do the work. It has felt very, very close and tight-knit, and I've felt it. I don't know if individuals who aren't ensconced in this work will feel the same way. So that's our fear. Again, we don't want to put anyone in a position where more harm can happen. But we just found out that some of our co-workers, our colleagues in Baltimore County actually had an outdoor conference. So we're going to start accepting referrals, and we are going to attempt to organize outdoor conferences in secluded spaces so people can still be socially distant and attempt to work out their conflict. In the communities, we do a few different types of processes. We have conflict resolution circles, and it's very similar to a conference, but it's more connection building. There are more rounds on getting to know people, because when people are in conflict, I know for me personally, when I'm in conflict with someone, it's hard. It's actually kind of easy because I do this work, but I can understand how it's hard to stop thinking about exactly what's happening. Like, that's what you're thinking. You're thinking about what's happening. You're not thinking about the other person. You're not thinking about, well, I remember when I was hurt that long time ago. You're just thinking about what's in your face. So during a conflict resolution circle, it's almost like a hybrid conference. There are connection building rounds, just like you all do when you start your meetings. So, and storytelling is huge. People connect to stories. So there are storytelling rounds. So people, for that moment, stop thinking about what's happening right now, and they actually think about something else. So then they're in a more restorative space where they can hear what's going on. Oh, I remember that time when I did harm somebody. Oh, I remember when I was misunderstood and how I felt in that moment. So that way, when they get to talking about the conflict, they're a little less elevated and more willing to open up dialogue. So we have the conflict resolution circles. There's also support circles. If someone in the community, so this can be organization, this can be homeowners associations, this can be any type of workplace. We do all of these processes with anyone in the community can actually reach out to us if they would like to before they call the authorities. The only downside to that is a lot of times if they reach out to us, it's because they don't want to say anything. Like, they don't want to call legal people, but they don't want to approach the person who has done them harm. And this process is totally, at all times, voluntary. So if we call someone and say, hey, would you like to participate in this process? They're like, what? First of all, who called you and who told you? Then you're putting another person in harm. So that's the only downside. But if everyone's willing to participate, we will organize a circle. Also, at any point in the circle, it's always voluntary and everything is an invitation. That's why I was actually happy that Tiffany passed the first round, because everything is an invitation. Nothing is you can't say, hey, you have a choice to come here, and then mandate what you have to do each time. Everything is an invitation. So conflict resolution circles, support circles, that's all I can think of community wise. And I guess you all will ask me some questions regarding that. Oh, we've also done them in elder communities as well. Yeah. And it doesn't only have to be based around an incident. It can be a community building circle, just a getting to know each other. Because a lot of times people don't know their neighbors anymore. People don't know who they're next to. We assume things about people all the time. We love to say we're not judgmental, and we are. We're always judging. It's just, how we were raised. The goal is to find out something and to raise curiosity, because if you're curious, you're less likely to be judgy. If you're curious, you're less likely to get angry. If you genuinely want to know about something, then it will also de-escalate a situation. That's what I'm going to say about that.
All right, so great. So I'm kind of curious, and you may be having to talk about the sort of pre-pandemic time.
Yeah.
And I know a thing that folks in RJ world love to do anyway is to talk about some of the successes that you've had, some of the good stories that you're able to tell. And I know, there's always issues around permission and whose story and so forth. So I don't want you to violate any of that. But if there's some things that you can share about where you've seen traction or where you've seen success or where it's worked. So
it works everywhere.
Right.
So a story that jumps out to me is a story about a fig tree. It's a fig tree, and these were adults, and there's something called green space where you can where they plant. They want to have more green spaces. So there was a family who was living next to a green space, and they hated the green space. So, because I'm an investor facilitator, I have feelings about people who hate green spaces. We need green spaces, right? So automatically I'm like, who are these terrible, terrible people? Let me go ahead and enact my curiosity. So as I'm talking, and I'm like, why don't you like green spaces? Because most of my children have asthma. Okay. And then my next thought is, I wonder if the people who have the green space know this. So my mind's already working, like I already can see the breakdown and understanding. So I continue to organize it, and everyone is angry, angry, angry. The man whose tree, so it was a fig tree, and I just recently found out that figs are delicious. They don't look delicious. They are scrumptious. So this fig tree finally grows. It's bearing fruit, finally. They're excited. And what does the family do? The husband, he chops down the fig tree. So they are livid. So the person who called, they were from the green space, and they're just like, I don't know what to do. Like, they didn't want the green space, and they've been complaining about it for a long time. They love this tree, and now it's gone. So hesitantly, I organized this conference. I was really nervous, and I'm always nervous. Even after 10 years, I never know what's going to happen, and I think that's actually kind of good. I just heard that butterflies are good, because if I go into cocky, that means I think I have it, and then I might just ruin the whole thing. So I'm nervous every time. So before this one, I'm really, really nervous. Here's another piece that's important as an investor facilitator. The green space people were all white, and the family's Black. So that's there too. So as an investor facilitator, I know that this is a dynamic. I'm not going to act like, oh, well, they're just people, just aren't. No, there's a dynamic here. So we get there, and no one's smiling. Everyone is, everyone actually just wants us to be over. No one really wants to be here, but everyone said that they were willing to attempt. But everyone also said they're not going to listen. They're not going to listen. No one thought that anyone was going to listen. Long story short, I tried to ask the man who chopped down the tree, as I said earlier, a huge part of our job is to get the emotional part out, like to get people to understand why someone did something. What was their motivation to do what they did without saying, why did you do that? So the guy, he had been drinking, and he said he went to clean up some trash, and he starts to chop this tree down. I still don't understand why. So he starts to chop the tree down, and when he chops it down, a white person came out yelling at him. So I asked him, okay, so when this man came out, what was going through your mind? So he didn't really, just to let you all know, children don't know how to connect with their emotions. There are a lot of adults who don't know how to connect with their emotions either, or understand what it is they're feeling. So I say, like, what were you thinking when this man came out and started yelling? Like, what was going through your mind? I wasn't thinking anything. I was just thinking I need to chop this down. Yes, but he's yelling at you. What were you thinking? I wasn't thinking anything. Okay, so I'm just not going to ask anymore, because you can ask, but you can't push. Then a bunch of other people start coming out, white people, and they're yelling, and he's still chopping the tree down. So what were you thinking when all the other people came out? Like, now there's a whole bunch of people yelling at you. What was going through your mind? I don't know. I have no idea what they were doing. I just wanted to chop the tree down. Okay. So then they call the police. All right. So then the police come, and there's all these angry people. Sir, and in today's climate, what were you thinking when the police were called and all these people are here? So then, and he still didn't connect. And then at some point he finally said, I hate that I don't remember. He finally said, like, what it was. Like, I was scared. I didn't know what was happening. So I just started ignoring it because I started getting like fearful. So he starts saying that. So then they start understanding, okay, so us doing that made you get more tense and almost dig in your heels. Then the older gentleman whose fig tree it was explained what the fig tree meant to him. So then they understood, okay, so this fig tree wasn't just a tree. This was a tree that you grow it's not quick. This has been years and you've been waiting for it to actually bear fruit. It finally does. I chop it down. So then they understand. So what is it that you need to make this right? $500. Oh, okay. Here you go. Here's a check for $500. There was still tension. There was still a man who just didn't seem to like the family. So the woman finally says to him, I want to know, once we pay this, once this is over, will this be resolved? So he had a real mean face and he was like, well, and so then she asked him, he started saying something else. And I said, hold on, did you hear her question? So he thought, and then he had to, like, how can you hold that? Like, if they honored what they were going to do, how can you still be mad? So he said, yes. And his face softened, and then that was it. So it was resolved. Then I checked in with the older gentleman who got the money for the fig tree. And he says, he's like, I feel bad. I would like to give this money back. Like, I don't want to take his money. And it just goes to show that just conversation and connection, like, less than that. He didn't give the money back. Like, he wanted him to have it. The guy's like, no, like, I cut down your tree. I want you to have it. So just places where you don't think people can make connections or people aren't going to see each other, if you give them a structure and a place to see each other, it's amazing what could happen. I would have never thought that would have happened. That's one of my favorite stories.
The fig tree. I love those figs too.
Oh man, they're delicious. I wish I would have known as a child. I got missed out on years of fig eating.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm feeling like there might be some questions coming up because I was going to ask you about the biggest challenge and this other set of questions, but I think actually I'm going to switch it up a bit and see if there are some questions that have come out of what you've been saying already, because I don't want to leave people in the dust or anything like that. So so I'm going to start actually from my part of the speaking order, passing you, since you may have questions of yourself. But
I don't have any questions for me. I'll pass it to Tarek.
Okay, so pass to Tarek. So this question round is an invitation. If you have a question, hang on, Tarek. If you have a question, feel free to to ask it, what I'm thinking we'll do is we'll collect up the questions during this round, and then Larell can answer them how she chooses. If you don't have a question or somebody else has asked your question, you always have the option to pass. So now, Tarek, do you have a question? I don't know if, Tarek, you there?
Hello?
Yes, hi.
Hi, okay. I'm very confused by my phone because sometimes it's on mute and it doesn't mute, sometimes it does. Okay, so I didn't actually have a question. I was talking to my son because we were on the road. But I do have a question, I guess. Yes, actually, Larell, the question is quite open-ended. If you knew you had 60 members of the local Baltimore community from various community organizations, faith organizations, from inside the criminal system, the education system, community organizations, and they all were organizing together under the banner of restorative justice, very engaged, motivated to do things. What would you want to do with that group?
Okay, so we're going to pass to Bill, I guess, is next.
Yeah, actually, Larell, thank you. I'd love to have you facilitating the conflict I was in. I had put in the chat a question where I was looking for you to explain the practical differences that you would have done with any case as a neutral facilitator and how it would change when you became an invested facilitator. So for example, the kid that you talked about was stealing food because he was starving, or the case of the fig tree. But I'd just like to know in practical terms, how did it change when you went from a neutral facilitator to an invested facilitator? Thank you. And excuse me, I have passed on to David.
Mine's more of a practical question. Out of 100 cases, or whatever number, how successful are you with getting both parties to want to be part of the process? And I pass to McGinnis.
I pass. And to Alicia. Sorry, Alicia.
It's okay. I think my question's fairly narrow, and it's more like, as you were talking about the community conferencing with families, like I mean, families have a lot of their own dynamics, and that's part of the reason that they're there, but especially with children, like what does it look like, and how do you make sure it's safe for kids? I mean, because families have all of these dynamics, and I'm just like curious about how you make sure it's safe, and then also like what happens when like kids can't or won't speak up because of their family, and how do you manage those dynamics, or like social workers' presence, all of that. So complicated and not simple, but narrow. And I pass to Tiffany.
Can I just ask, Leanne, you're writing these down, right? Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks,
sorry, I was
Larell.
muted. Go ahead.
Sorry. Thanks, Larell, for sharing. My question is around the capacity piece, because this is a voluntary exercise. What are your tips for building the capacity for, or cultivating an interest or propensity in wanting to participate in the restorative process? And what role a community working group could play in cultivating that propensity or desire? And I pass, I'm so sorry, pass to Nutan.
I just joined, I joined late. I had a Spanish class I just finished, so I'm going to go ahead and pass to Lisa Lynn.
Okay. If Lisa Lynn isn't right there, I'll switch places with her. And well, I keep listening to all of this because I know how deeply the community of people who see mentally ill people end up in the court system want to see something like this work. So I'm wondering if you've ever worked with circumstances that would tie in here.
I actually posted a question. When you mentioned support groups, I wanted to know a little bit more about what that is. I've seen a support group in a setting of a boys facility. So I was curious what that meant in a community circle. Michael.
I was kind of somewhat curious along the lines of what Alicia said about the children. That's not something we usually think about. So kind of the same question as her, I guess.
I had to step away for just a moment, so I apologize if someone had asked. Just in how this, any restorative justice program is really made available to all different communities, especially when we're talking about individuals who may not speak English. So if it's, Mongolian, for instance, how do we ensure that that's available for all types of communities?
And I'm going to pass because my questions have been asked. And I pass to Kimiko.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larell, for being here and sharing with us. I'm going to pass so you have more time for answers. Thank you.
Okay, it's great. It's back to me. So Larell, do you want to choose one of those? Do you want me to sort of start
thinking just read them.
Feeding them to you? Okay. All right. So just kind of going in order. Bill asked about the practical difference between being a neutral and an invested facilitator.
Yeah. So I think it's really about giving yourself permission to ask the next question and not thinking you have to stay in such a structured space. So if someone says something, for example, the kids, let me think. Yes. So there's a police officer and a young person in the circle, which we really don't like to do. If they do come in the circle, I don't want them to wear a uniform because I don't want a young person to be triggered by just his presence of what's happening. And then I'm going to invite him, if he's going to participate, to not only talk about how this affects like the community, but how it affects him personally. I'm going to make it personal. I'm going to have him talk about his personal experience. And if he says something in that circle that kind of diminishes the young person's fear of police, because some people don't think that that's really a thing, or they think it's because the community's bad, or because kids get in trouble, or because Black people are a certain way. So if I hear anything like that, or an officer say something like all lives matter, I'm going to ask the next question. When you say all lives matter, what does that mean? What do you think he thinks that means? Would you like to, I'm going to ask a question regarding that. I'm not going to just stick to just the incident or just what's presented. I'm going to question what's been brought up. That still does not give an invested facilitator the permission to press or to say, you shouldn't say that, because that's not what it does. But what it does do is allow me to ask a question to bring up conversation so it can be explored a little more. If someone says something like, when I see you and those kids over there, I always think you're up to something. When you see them over there, well, what do you think they're up to? They're up to stealing. What makes you think that? Have you seen them steal before? I'm going to get deeper. I'm not going to just leave it at surface and leave it up to them to bring it all up. Did that help?
Okay. Next, Oh, okay, Lisa Lynn's coming back. Yeah, she had to dip out. She told me that would happen. David asked about how successful you've been in getting all parties to participate.
So for a community conferencing process, for the reactive end, we're running about 40 to 50%. And I think, and actually it's more on the lower side. But that's because our society, we're a punitive society. We are a society that wants to keep people apart, and we just want people to be punished. And accountability and responsibility has to look in a punitive manner. We don't know that there are other ways to resolve conflict. Where is she? Tiffany, where's Tiffany? So Tiffany,
there she is.
So Tiffany brought up earlier Fania Davis's book, the little book of race and restorative justice. In Africa, there's no name for restorative justice. It's just a way of life. It's just how they move. So they don't even know that there's another way. There's even instances of murder. If someone from one tribe, or if one family murders someone from another family, they don't want that family member to lose another member. They take that family member, and now they're a part of their family. Not to punish them, they're just a part of their family. So our society does not view things as people aren't disposable. We think people are disposable all the time. So it's low because people are definitely, they think this is weird and touchy-feely, and I want them to pay. So the restorative justice end, the reactive end, community conferencing is less likely to meet in a circle, but a community building, even a conflict resolution circle, a support circle, those people it's not surrounding an incident. So people aren't so tense in showing up. People think, they're like, okay, well, let's see what this is. It's not incident-based. Even a conflict resolution circle does not have to be incident-based. It could be surrounding something that's happening in the community, and they want to come together to figure out how to resolve it without involving other people. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. That was a great answer. Thank you.
Perfect. You're welcome.
I'm going to actually follow up on that with skipping around because it's related, because you mentioned different kinds of circles. And Michael Swisher asked about support circles, or what's that about?
Yeah. So support circles could be for a couple of things. A youth returning to the community who doesn't know anyone, who wants to, it's like a welcome circle, so that he knows different people in the community. Maybe he'll meet somebody from the school, maybe some kids in the neighborhood. Just what does he need to be successful? Support circle could be for a young person who seems to need some resources and is not acting in a manner that is going to be smiled upon. That's how I'm going to put it. So the young person's kind of running wild, and no one really understands why, what's going on, what kind of supports are needed. We can call, speak with him as well as his family, and find out from them personally. Every circle that we organize, we must speak with every single person that's going to participate. We need to make sure that they understand why they're coming, what the purpose is, what they need to have there to feel supported, who they need to have there, what space is good, just to make sure everyone is on the same accord and someone's not coming for some off-base reason. So we'll invite everybody there so that they can try to come up with ways to support this young person. Because we're a community organization, as an invested facilitator, I too may have some suggestions or something I can offer to them if they're stuck, if they don't know where to go or what resources are out there. We will provide them. As an invested facilitator, I'm part of the community. So I'm just as invested as their being successful as their family is. So I can jump right into the kid piece, because I feel like that kind of goes with it. So sometimes young people aren't, they don't feel good about participating. Sometimes we want the parent to be their support person, and they're not. I think honestly, there was a time that I probably wasn't the best support person for my oldest son. My youngest one has the benefit that I've been doing this for 10 years now, so he gets a nice mommy. My 23-year-old, he got the mom I thought I was supposed to be because I watched parents yell at their kids and not talk to them and not ask questions. I didn't know. So there was a time, if there was a process like this, I may not have been the best person for my son. He probably would have needed his father, my mother, just someone else. So how we try to mitigate that or navigate that is, I think a large part of it is being an invested facilitator. The story I just shared, I may share that with a parent who is coming off as overbearing, who is saying things. I'm going to be honest and I'm going to say, I get it. Like, and the transparent and honesty piece, I don't know how to explain how that breaks down barriers. That stops people from thinking I'm judging or that we know what's best. I don't. I just found this out because I work here. If you worked here too, maybe you would know. But because I work here, I can tell you, this is the way I was with my son, and this is how I am with him now. Even during the process, I've been able to check, especially Black mothers, because they understand me. You know, we're of the same community. We have the same values and norms. So I know how to say to this mom, like, whoa, you're being a little rough. Girl, I understand that. He said, girl, just hold on, let him talk. I know, just hold on. And it brings it down, because I'm not saying what you should do. I'm not judging you. I'm saying from my own, this is what happened and why I was the way I was. So just try this out and see how it works. And we also speak with the children too, because they're going to talk in this process. They have to be safe and comfortable to speak. So if there's any inkling that this child is uncomfortable or the parent's not going to be the best parent to be there, I'm going to ask, who else would you like to have there so that you feel comfortable enough? I'm even going to ask mom, oh, I hear how you're sounding. Would you like to have somebody there to help you through this? It sounds like it's been tough. Who would you like to have there to support you? Because that's another thing. Parents also feel, because I felt this, so I'm speaking for me, we feel a lot of pressure. We feel judged. We feel like people are telling us what to do. And I know I didn't want people to judge me because of my kids. So I did too much. So we have that pressure of showing up a certain way, you know, respectability politics, sit up, do this. So if you release that pressure a little bit, like, mom, kids, you know, that just feels better than saying, well, what did you need to do? So how do you think you need to fit? You know, that feels different than, oh, girl, these kids, I know. All right, so look, we're going to have this process. You're going to be able to hear from him. You're going to be able to support him. And Laretha is going to be with you to help you through this, because not only is your child going through this, you are too. So that kind of helps with that dynamic. I'm not going to say it works all the time. I've had to, during a process, actually take a parent out, because during prep, he acted like he was going to be the best parent, so supportive, and he was terrible. And his daughter was being bullied by other people. And he just, because she wasn't physically hit, he couldn't understand why we're meeting. Well, why are we meeting? If they didn't touch you, then and the beauty of this process is other parents were like, yo, man, what are you doing? He's never going to tell you. And then they were checking their children. So although this gentleman was not there to support, she got it from the other children's parents, and she got it from the other administrators as well. So during the process, hopefully, if that's not the person, you'll get somebody who's there who can be the person. This has never come up where I have felt a child is unsafe. We're mandatory reporters, so if that were the case, I would have to report that. And it wouldn't be, I would never report something on an assumption, because sometimes some really well-meaning people have put children in a system because they didn't understand culture, they didn't understand, and that's another reason you have to understand the communities you're with. Sometimes some parents say some real crazy shit, and it's not really abuse. It's culturally, you know, maybe we can talk to them later about, maybe you don't want to say that, maybe say this, but it's not abuse worthy.
All right. I want to there's a couple more questions, and then I want to have our other questions. We still have about 15 minutes, so on our clock. So Kathy was asking about if you ever worked in situations where mental illness was a factor, and yeah. So, do you have an example?
Huh. The one that's coming to my mind, it didn't end well. I actually had my husband come. I didn't realize mental illness was a factor, but during the process, it felt like it because of how he was responding. So if mental illness is a factor and the participants know about it, I would ask who else needs to come again. Does the young person's therapist need to be there? Is there a support person, a one-on-one, someone who needs to be there? What comes to mind to me is Lauren during her training talks about a young person who was stealing money from their aunt. Him and his mother were living with the aunt and he was stealing money. He was stealing money because he was a kleptomaniac. It wasn't because, and he stole it and threw it away. So the aunt's really like, what in the, how are you, it's bad enough you stole it, but you threw it away. So the therapist was invited to explain what kleptomania is and how it shows up and why it wasn't the young person's fault. So if there's a mental illness and it comes up in any part of the prep, there can be support people or resource people to explain it so that the other participants understand it, so that they can take that into consideration when they do the agreement, so that that person can be supported in moving forward.
All right, great.
I think you froze, Leanne.
And I was like, is she frozen?
Yeah, I think she's frozen.
She is. Okay, I'm gonna see if another question, I should have wrote them down.
Let's see. Can look through the list to see if there were any others.
Did we get to Michael Swisher's question next? He was next in the speaking order.
What is the purpose and process for a support circle?
So I talked about the process a little bit. So the purpose is to connect the individual. Oh, Leanne's back.
I'm back.
The purpose is to connect individuals with necessary resources so they can be productive and successful. And that can be the school community, it could be the neighborhood community, employers, like if someone has like some type of job readiness program can be invited to find out what it is that the young person needs in order to be successful. Yeah, and the process is just speaking with everyone beforehand so that they understand what the purpose is. Like, this young person is moving in, they need support. Would you like to come, offer your support, or even just find out what's going on? And some people don't know they can support until they're in the circle.
All right, good.
Welcome back, Leanne.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It just happens. It's what happens.
Yeah.
So that was so Lauren had a question about sorry, I want to skip to Tiffany's question and then come over to Lauren's question. So Tiffany had a question about building the desire to participate. And I know that you all and Restorative Response Baltimore have been doing a lot of community outreach. And so I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, because that's a piece of work that I think this community working group can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe you want to talk a little bit about how you do that.
So I think it's really just being visible and available on all social media platforms is one. We have an IG, we have, and as you know, I don't run it, IG, Facebook, which young kids aren't on anymore, that's why we're on IG, and we're on Twitter. As well as we send out newsletters, updating the community on events we're having. We send out articles. It's just being visible and just talking about what's going on. That's really it. Because the thing is, outreach is constant, and I don't even know the best way to do it. We've been doing it for years, and I still have people like, who are you? This exists? It's been 25 years. I don't know, like, we talk about it. We're on all social media platforms. I don't know. What we are going to do, and I don't know, this is actually not going to answer the question, but we're going to incorporate a youth advisory council. That's what we just got funding for, because we're doing these processes and services, and actually we still don't really know if the young people are loving it. We have a survey after when we contact them, a follow-up, but they're just 5 questions. It's not really, young people aren't asking for processes like this. Young people aren't saying, we want a conference, like they're just not. And there's been a ton of them that have participated. So we need, again, like I said earlier, we need to find out from the people that we're providing this service to, what do you like it? What don't you like? What would you do? You know, because we need to understand what they want and what they need and what could make it successful. So just constant outreach. I don't know, constant outreach.
Can I follow on to that? So I know you say you're from Boston. There's this amazing organization out of Lowell, Massachusetts, which is called UTEC. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but they have a Teens Leading the Way, and it's also a youth-led advocacy type of initiative. So they push for policy changes and all that. But I guess to follow on to my question about increasing interest in building capacity, how often do you encounter folks who know what restorative practices are, but still have a resistance to, or who are still kind of resistant to engage in the process?
All the time.
And what do you do? Okay.
All the time. So just people, a lot of times people, when you say be restorative or, you know, restorative justice or practices, people are thinking, I'm going to do something to someone, or I can just act this way. They don't think it's about them. So once you start talking about, well, can you talk about how you were affected? Well, what about, you know, when you start like delving into people, that makes you uncomfortable and you don't want to do it. I guess, again, it's just being invested in just, we're not pushy. We don't push, we offer, we don't convince, we don't sell anyone, we explain. How I was trained by Lauren Abramson was define, don't defend. So once you become defensive and try to convince somebody, they're going to dig in their heels and say why it's not what they're going to do. But if you just explain what it is, and you can even give them an example of, okay, so if not this, then what? You know, what are your next steps? Well, I'm going to go through this. Okay, so how long are you willing to wait? If you remain in your questioning in a curious manner, they will get to the answer that they want. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. And this process will not work with people who don't want to do it. I promise you it won't. If someone is saying like, I don't want to be there, then they don't. And they're not going to even attempt to be restorative. Someone who is a little apprehensive, but is like, well, you know, I'll give this a try. That person will be okay. But yeah, there's no, like, here it is, this is what it looks like, here's an example if you want, and that's all you can really do. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, just making sure I've got all the questions. So Lauren asked about how you ensure access to everybody. Do you? Can you?
What do you mean? Like, how do we make sure everyone can come?
Yeah, or, you know, like if well, Lauren, you can unmute and explain.
Lauren,
Sure. So just making sure it's accessible, especially for people whose first language isn't English. So, you know, incorporating, I don't know, the use of interpreters or how that would really work in this process.
Yep. I forgot about your interpreter question. So we were fortunate that we had someone on our staff, a facilitator who spoke Nepalese. We had a Spanish-speaking interpreter. We had one of our colleagues, her husband spoke French. So you have to have access to those interpreters. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you don't have someone on staff, it's best to find out if there's something in your area where you can, hopefully you all will have some money for this, you can pay an interpreter. An ideal scenario would be an interpreter going through the training so they understand what the process is, because sometimes when people interpret, they kind of put filler words or change. They don't do it like exactly. They'll say what they think they're trying to say or what they think they should say. They just don't do it verbatim. If an interpreter understands the process, they will understand why it just has to be said, you know, exactly how they're saying it and not the feeling of it, but their exact words. So not only did we have people who worked for us who were interpreters, through our court system where we, there are referral partners for our diversion cases, we have an opportunity to utilize some of their interpreters as well. Yeah, very important.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I think that covers everybody's questions that came out during the round. So I'm going to just ask kind of a wrap-up double question, because that's what I get to do. And for that, I want to ask you, what has been the biggest challenge for Restorative Response Baltimore? And what do you want us to know as we consider how to implement restorative practices here in Arlington?
So I think the biggest barrier is like, so again, people don't want to mirror. So restorative practices, a main part of it is first looking at yourself. People don't want to look at themselves. They want to just do something and make things better. They don't, if you participate in any of these processes, you have to be vulnerable yourself. You have to be invested. You have to be willing to share a little bit. Now, what you share is up to you. You don't, sometimes I go overboard. Like, I hope some people don't meet my children because they know everything about them. So you don't have to do that. That's not something you have to do. It's within your comfort, because again, we're people. So if you're an introvert and it's not your thing to tell people your stuff, don't. As an introvert, I'm not an introvert, but I'm hoping that an introvert could share, I'm an introvert. So I'm not going to go that deep, but I want you, because that to me is showing vulnerability too. The participants are only going to be as vulnerable as a person sitting with them. If they have someone on the outside who's kind of just looking, I'm not going to tell you all my stuff. But if someone is being honest, even with, I'm not going to go that deep, it makes it easier. So that part, and also, oh man, I lost my train of thought. So the fear of themselves, and also, man, I lost it. There was one other thing.
Okay, so do you want me to give you like a 15 seconds of filler in there? Yeah. I'm going to say for an introvert, I'm an introvert. I'm actually willing to share, but I know different people aren't, you know, so that's a thing. But at any rate, so maybe that gave you brain time enough to think of something.
Man, so the fear of it, I'm so upset with myself. So that's a huge part. Okay. Another barrier is, I was going to say getting the word out. Oh, I know exactly what it is. People want things to happen. They want people to sit down and, why isn't this fixed? Why are people still acting this way? Why aren't people connected? Everything takes time. It took us a long time to get so disconnected. It's going to take us a while to get reconnected. People want instantaneous. They want things to be resolved yesterday. They don't want building connections and community. It takes a minute. It takes a while. It's not something that we can just sit people in a circle and now everything, oh, we're connected. Now there's not going to be any conflict. Because as I said earlier, yes, people are now connected, but there's still going to be conflict. Like there's going to be more breaks in the chain where people are going to need to be reconnected again. So that's another barrier. Like people just wanting restorative practices to be something that fixes everything, fixes this child's behavior immediately, fixes this neighbor's attitude right now, fixes, you know, and this isn't a quick fix. This is a long haul. This is the beginning. And it's ongoing. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. I feel like me and my team are super duper connected because we had to go through like hell and high water. I feel like we are just loving each other. And I tell you what, when we get back to the office, I'm sure we are going to be at each other's throats a little bit. It's just what happens. We'll figure out how to come out of it. But we're not going to, you never achieve. All right, now I'm restorative. Like, it's never achieved.
Yeah, okay. Alicia reminded me that I skipped Tarek's question. I know Tarek had been, I think he lost connection for a minute there. So he's back, and I'm going to be sure to ask his question. I had to chuckle when he asked this question, because he's basically asking the question of, like, what would you do if you had a whole bunch of people like us right here in our working groups trying to sort it all out? So yeah, do tell. What would you do?
And it's so funny, because I wrote training on RP, and I was like, why did I write that? That's why.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about, I think the main thing I would do is just do a bunch of self-work. I think that's it. So I just started therapy, like when COVID started not too long ago. I hope my husband can't hear me, because he hates it. He constantly hears me talking about him. Might bust it. So when this started, like, initially I was like, oh, we're gonna be so great, you know, the world's falling apart and it's just a little family. It's awesome. And then it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And I was like, I'm dying, I'm drowning. He should blah blah. And then I thought about, like, what I do, and just I went inside, and I was like, wait a minute, why am I putting everything on him? Why am I relying on him for my happiness and my pandemic self? Like, why am I doing it? And I was like, I gotta go to counseling. So because I have this RP training, I know that the power is in us, and we have to take accountability for our own shit. You know, I was like, what am I doing? Because, you know, I'm pretty cool, but I'm a little cray. So I had to really be honest and be like, you know, what are you doing to stir this pot? You know, you married him, like, he can't be that bad. So I think just doing, like, real work on ourselves to understand that we are individual. Because once you have that, once you're like, all right, I understand what my place is, I understand how it works and how people think, and not be judgmental, like, it makes it easier to relay that. You know, it comes through you. People say to me sometimes, like, when you sit in a circle, you have a way that people think it's going to be resolved. Like, people just almost are like, even if they're angry, they're like, all right, because I don't front. I don't know if y'all know what front means, but I don't, like, put up false airs. I don't say or do things, like, for appearances. Like, I'm so honest. I'm honest to a fault. Like, it's gonna work or it's not. All I'm gonna do is provide the space and the place. So once you understand that and really embody it, it comes through.
All right. Thank you, and thank you.
You're welcome.
We are ready for our time for a break, but I want to give, and you're welcome to stay on with us, or if you're, like, done and you want to.
I'm enjoying this. I'm going to stay.
Okay. All right. Yay. Welcome. Well, you're certainly welcome to stay. So, so we're going to take a 10-minute break, but before we do, I just want to give everybody a chance to say thank you to you. So if you guys want to open up your mics and say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larell. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank y'all. Oh, I like those thank yous.
Yes. So, and if y'all have other questions, because I know how it is with me, it's like, oh, dang, I should ask this. Will you take some questions if we collect them up and email you or something like that?
Yeah, of
Okay.
course. And I'll share my contact information so people can always be in contact.
Sure. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. You could put that in the chat if you want, or something like that. Okay. So cool. So we are at, what is the actual digital time here? 8:18, just a tiny smidge behind. So let's take a break for 10 minutes. Feel free to turn off your video and whatever you need, do whatever you need to do for 10 minutes. We'll be back at 8:28.